How did we end up here today?
You were posting so many things that I just resonated with. A while ago, you did a bit of a questionnaire about the experiences that and others had faced. And I was so excited that someone was asking the hard questions. And I have been seeking to have community with other women, not just in the tech space, but just in general, working in corporate offices. It can be very challenging. And I do think working in those spaces presents different challenges that we can help each other overcome. And that was really what drew me there. And since I've been able to attend meetings, I was very excited to meet all of the other ladies there. I feel like I'm going to be surrounded by all of these incredibly intelligent individuals, all women, and it's just a strong, powerful thing to be a part of. It's a strong, powerful community to be a
Yeah.
part of. So that was what drew me to the Overachievers.
That makes me so happy. And clearly, you fit right in. In the short amount of time we've gotten to know each other, I'm wowed by your story and everything you had to say. And you're so humble. And there's so much power behind your story. So, where should we even begin?
I think maybe the most appropriate might be my start in joining the Army. It was a pivotal moment for me. I had gone through so much in my home life growing up. I didn't come from the greatest of beginnings, and there were lots of challenges with how I grew up. So I ended up being a runaway at 16 years old. I went from Washington State to Florida, and through the grace of God and the universe, I was protected. And I'm so grateful for that. And that led me to making the choice to join the Army rather than trying to continue with a career at that point. I just knew I was not ready for college. I knew I didn't have support maybe in the way that others might have. And I knew it wasn't going to be very easy for me to just focus on school and trying to grow financially and individually in that way. So I made the choice in my senior year to join the Army.
Those
I
are tough
joined,
decisions for a
I know.
17-year-old to be making. I mean, you are in such a great place now, but it's really challenging to think about the pressure we even put on ourselves at 17 as a whole. And
uh,
as you pointed out, your life experience was very unique to your story. How do you feel about it looking back on it now?
Looking back, I still can't even believe. I still have moments where I'm like, am I really here? My life has changed so drastically. And at that age, there's no way I could fathom who I would be today. I knew who I didn't want to be, but I wasn't sure quite who I would be or what that would look like. I actually had to have my mom sign over paperwork so that I could join because I was still 17 years old. And then I left 3 days after high school graduation. I left straight for the Army. I was still a baby, and I still look at 17-year-olds today and I'm like, at that time, I was joining the Army and I was such a baby.
Yeah, but what that must do for your grit, your perseverance, your ability to work through all kinds of challenges. I'm sure it was the experience of a lifetime.
It was. I learned so much. And, basic training, I hear it's a little bit different now, but it was pretty strict back then. We
Yeah.
did, lots of running, lots of ruck marches. It takes true grit, true fortitude to get through basic training and to really pull yourself up if you've never done anything like that before, or if you've never seen anything like that before.
Experience what you thought it would be, or did you even know how do you go into that with any
I didn't know what
expectation?
to expect,
Yeah.
honestly. I didn't know. I knew I had joined the Army to be in technology. I was actually between uh, technology and information security, and
Okay.
I chose technology to go with the information technology route. So I was a 25 Bravo, but I had no idea that I would be like expected to be so physical all the time.
Yeah.
I couldn't have imagined, honestly. It's very interesting.
And it's amazing that you still knew at such an early age that tech was an area that you wanted to focus on. Where do you think that came from? Did you have guidance? What was it that had planted that seed in you?
I was just always a little bit more adept in technology than others around me. And I
Yeah.
think I was always like the go-to person, like, can you figure this out in Word or can you figure this out in Excel? And when I was really young, I used to type on Mavis Beacon. Do you remember
Oh my
Mavis
God,
Beacon?
yes. Wait. I
I was
loved
like,
I love that
no,
app. That was so fun.
love with it, especially as a child. So I would
Yeah.
just sit there, learn to type. So I've always like had a certain interest to computers, but it definitely broadened my horizons in that area in a lot of ways. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's amazing. And then how did you decide to get out and that time was up?
The army is very, very challenging, and it's
Yeah.
not necessarily the job, it's not necessarily the physical part. You also have to deal with the interpersonal relationships while in the army, and everyone is not the same as you.
Yeah.
Everyone does not think the same as you, and I was very, very young, and I think it showed, right? So I definitely had some challenges in that aspect, and not all the time, but there were certain things that happened that led to me saying there's no more. And I think it was more so after I had my children. I just had a negative experience with some senior leadership during my pregnancy. And at this point, we could call it like pregnancy discrimination, certain things they
Yeah.
were wanting me to do. And it actually led to the loss of my first child. And it
Oh
was very
no.
traumatizing for me.
Yeah.
After that, I was just like, I can't do it anymore. So,
That's huge. Thank
yeah.
you for sharing that. I mean, there's so much power in being vulnerable and sharing even as much as you have now.
Yeah.
How does one begin to cope? Did you have resources or places to go, or you're just kind of in the moment, I'm dealing with this and I've just got to find a way through?
I didn't have the right resources. I can say that now. I can say that I've always been the type of person to pick myself up because I had to. I'm not a quitter.
Yeah, I
I
get
will
that.
not quit and I will not give up, but there's times where life might knock you down just a bit. So it was very tough and challenging to deal with, but I do think we as a country have grown when it comes to pregnancy in the workplace, and I hope that other people are having better experiences now. That's what I can hope for because that was a very, very tragic experience for me to experience. So,
Devastating. That's
yeah.
devastating. And how do you, yeah, you've got to also give yourself the time and space to sit with that
Mhm.
experience, you know? So when you went through that and decided to part ways, did it also maybe teach you what to look for at other organizations? Did you take some downtime? What was that transition process like for you?
Um, when that happens, because I didn't have the right resources, I ended up having, I'm going to say, a mild mental breakdown
Yeah.
through introspection, through connecting with God and the universe. I was able to heal myself.
Yeah.
I was for a really long time, I blamed myself. It taught me to stand up for myself more because in a lot of ways I wasn't. I was, trying to follow directions and I was trying to, be the good soldier and just do what I was expected.
Yeah.
But in the long run, it didn't help me to not stand up for myself. So it definitely taught me to stand firm. No one knows your body like you, and you
Mhm.
have to live in that truth and take the consequences and the repercussions that come with that after the fact. And you just kind of have to push through. It definitely taught me to stand my ground, stand firm within myself, and if it's no, it's a no. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, it taught me those things.
I think that's huge. And I feel like that is also something we don't discuss often enough is how to pivot, when to pivot, and really reflecting on those experiences the same way.
That's so true. Every aspect you have to do some sort of introspection, and that's work, your education, where you see yourself in life, how you perform as a parent or as a partner or as a any type of relationship, mother, sister, friend, all of those things. I definitely agree. Introspection is one of those things that has helped me continue growing, helped me to continue to grow throughout this entire life. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
completely. Well, I mean, that's like the growth mindset right there, right? When I look at your involvement in the community and other women, that was my goal and what I wanted to create was like-minded women who understand growth mindset, who have had some life experience and want to figure out how do we now take these skills we have and a lot of those qualities that are good. It's great to be a go-getter. It's great to really lean into your calling, but to know what to do with that and how to more effectively harness it to make real improvement is something I think that needs to be done collectively and is more powerful when it's done collectively rather than you trying to figure it out as an individual.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah. So talk to me about what like the next phase was for you. So you took some time to heal. I love the spiritual aspect because you and I also spoke about that.
Mhm.
I feel like so often, at least for myself, I felt like you have to kind of keep that a little bit closer to home. There's not really space to talk about that in work environments, but
Mhm.
having a belief in something greater than you can be really powerful for navigating tough times.
It really can. I shied away from religion, knew that there was a higher power. However, I wasn't sure what that looked like. And so it took me some time to come into it to myself. And quite honestly, a lot of my spiritual gifts kicked in before I would recognize the
Yeah.
higher power. I definitely think my whole life I've experienced intuition. And it took me some time to lean
No, no, none of the air
intuition.
quotes. You've experienced intuition.
Yes. And so I guess I didn't really understand what it was, and it scared me for quite some time, probably scared others also. And so I do feel like once I leaned into it, things got a million times better for me to handle. It used to be too much. It used to make me super anxious because I felt all this energy. I could walk into a room and energy transference is very real, and not having that understanding of how to protect yourself and guard yourself. It definitely played a part in my life, and I had to learn those things in order to overcome and be able to be confident and sit with my gifts. So now I call it less intuition, I call it more clairsentience and clairvoyance. And I get, you know, things in different ways, and I accept it rather than run from it now. So
That's amazing. It's like, why question it? But I do think that's where society is so quick to tell you XYZ or label you in some type of form. But I mean, I think in so many contexts, women are somewhat naturally, if we are going to generalize,
yeah.
traditionally more intuitive. And I see this even like leadership styles because for so long, I think the generations of women that have come before us in even work environments, they have felt the need to fit a mold that maybe isn't natural to a lot of women. And I would say this with some of like the best women leaders that I've worked with is they do a really great job of balancing both those masculine and feminine traits. Like you should be leaning into your ability to connect with others and just some of these what we would label softer skills because I think women do that so well. And no, it's not just about men or women can or can't do this, but it's about leaning into what are commonly viewed as feminine skills.
Absolutely. I agree with that. There was this, I want to say it was a short story that I read a really long time ago. And I feel like it was called The Yellow Wallpaper. Have you heard of that one?
No, I haven't.
A story about this woman. She was married to a doctor, and he kept trying. This was a really old book. He kept trying to make her feel crazy. And this is back in the time where all women were considered a little bit crazy. So the
This is like last week.
well, maybe. Basically, the moral of that story was she wasn't crazy. She was just a woman, and her doctor was her husband, but it was just a man that didn't understand the things that she went through as a woman.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of times we face those challenges when people don't quite understand how to handle women. I'm not going to say emotions, but our intuitiveness, our soft skills, they have been in the past labeled as negative, whereas a lot of these things can be positive, and even more so positive in the workplace when you're trying to balance business but also humanity. I do feel like women bring a lot of the humanity to
Yeah.
life, in the most
Yeah.
literal sense and figurative. And I just think for so many years, I feel like women have been expected to reduce themselves, right, and not be too big. And I think that defeats the purpose of us being who we are. We are supposed to come in and do the things that men, may not be able to do as well. We are supposed to be that balance to masculinity. And whether we carry, I mean, most of us, we have masculine energies and we have feminine energies, but both of them balance can interplay in the best ways in the workplace.
Yeah,
Uh,
completely.
yeah, so I think about that a lot. I think about the yellow wallpaper. It's definitely a short story, but I mean, I think the moral of that is to not
What's
let
the
anybody
outcome? Does she figure it out?
remember. But she was, I mean, he was medicating her. So it was a wild story. I remember it was like 10th or 11th grade I read that story, but it's always stuck with me. And I can certainly say I've seen themes of that with other women and with myself. And it's just important to not reduce ourselves for anyone.
It's so interesting too how so many parallels exist when I look at a lot of your story and when I look at what's happening for women collectively or society collectively, there's this growing up in some ways that feels like is taking place, right? Because we have skewed so far one way and look at how much can change in our lifetime. Even women are realizing they have a voice and secure leaders across the board. You can be a man and be a secure leader and understand this and say this and not take things personally. And then there's also women who are still in different phases of their growth journey, but it's a really fascinating interplay to see what is happening and how there is just a lot that needs to evolve and will continue to evolve, but it's these baby steps that take place and we're all figuring out what are the individual roles we play within
Mhm.
this landscape, and where do you have accountability and where does the opposition have accountability? Because it's the same in corporate environments. Like you were saying, you went through something that showed you the importance of using your voice. And so it seems at some point we all get to that level of growth, but we have to go through these different experiences to realize, okay, I could have spoken up. I should have done this, this, and this. But now that I know better, I will do better next time, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yes,
I love
ma'am.
that. So you've had a very unique experience as a young Black woman in these corporate environments. What would you wish that people would know?
I really don't necessarily want everyone to have a run sheet of my life so they know how to, cater to me. I really want everyone to just treat others how they want to be treated. It seems so simple. It's one of the simplest lessons I've learned in this life. But one of the things I've seen is I actually do treat people how I want to be treated. And others sometimes require you to show them how they've mistreated someone in order for them to even have a glimpse of understanding. And I think that comes through with empathy. Lots of people are not practicing and do not have natural empathy. So I would say that a great deal of people need to work on empathy, especially in the workplace, especially towards women. I have seen different occasions, and not just in the workplace, but I've seen different occasions where a woman is expected to, like, if she knows more, or if she's even showing an inclination of being a little bit smarter, other people get threatened. And then you start seeing more and more microaggressions and more, just things that make the environment unsafe for her, for them, and for me. People like me, not just people of color, it's women, it's everyone who is of a marginalized group. And I see it so often, and I would ask, I would implore everyone to start practicing more empathy. The only thing is, though, I understand that empathy does take practice if it's not something that comes naturally to you.
Well, that's where the beauty and power and sometimes frustration lies in the fact that individuals like yourself have to really lead by example, and patients can be tested and tested and tested, and we still have to be that light. And you kind of learn through those experiences over time.
Mhm.
And I want you to tell the story about when you were at a major company, I won't say their name, and you had scored the highest on the training.
So I did this. I was working at a major company. If you've not heard of this company, I'm not even sure you exist. They actually had a training class for all new coming associates, and I was in this training class. I think it was about 8 or 9 weeks, and we had an open book final exam, and I scored the highest. The teacher, he came and he's like, "You know who scored the highest?" And he slammed the paper on my desk and he's like, "It was Lakia." And I was in a class of maybe about 50 or 60 people. I was the only Black woman in this training class, and there were two other women. They were not of color. And the rest of the class were men, and they were of mixed descent. So, it was mixed in that aspect, but it was predominantly white men. And when the teacher said this, there was like, I know, like, there was chatter in the background, and I could understand why. And the chatter did not bother me. But at the end of it, one of the guys, he was like, "Isn't that right, Shaniqua?" And he said something. And mind you, I'm very introverted. I just come there. I want to do my work. I'm going to study. I'm going to do whatever I can just to be successful, because that's my goal. My goal is not to focus on other people or their accomplishments or what they're doing. I focus on myself. And so when he said that, immediately, like,
Yeah.
boils, and I looked back and I said something to him. I said, "What did you say?" And of course he didn't repeat it, but it's just the sheer principality of, I scored higher than you on an open book exam, and probably because I am the only Black girl in the class, that offended you. These are the things that cause imposter syndrome. I have never once doubted my capabilities or my abilities to accomplish anything, because I work hard. I study. I have had numerous certifications since that class. I mean, the point of it all is it should have never happened. And when it did happen, it was not checked by anyone but me, and everyone heard it. And so these are the types of things that happen when other people feel threatened by your intelligence or your capability, or if they just feel like, "How does she do that?" I don't think there's been many times that I've had a job or position where my intelligence was not questioned. And that is very disheartening, because I don't even need to say it. I'm not even the person that's like, "Oh, I'm so smart, you need to listen to me." I've never been that. I've always been very quiet and unsuspecting. And I think that's what gets them, is because I don't speak very much unless I need to or unless I feel like it. And I think that
That's the
that
true
my
sign of a leader.
yeah,
That's the true
I
sign
don't
of a
need
leader.
to.
I'm not speaking just to hear myself speak.
And I'm certainly not a conformist, so I don't feel like I need to join the crowd. I've never needed to do that. But the problem is, this is what happens to people that stand out. And I know we were talking a little bit about the article that I was working on called The Audacity of the Unique. It
And the
takes a lot of
session you're going to be doing
yes, it. Um, but it speaks a lot to how brave you have to be an outlier, to stand in spaces that were never meant for you, that people do not want you in, that they would prefer you feel inferior to them. And when you refuse, they get very offended. And so I've had those experiences, and I've grown from those experiences. And I know that when those scenarios happen, I know it has nothing to do with me. I know it has everything to do with that person and what they're feeling on the inside.
That's such a powerful story. What drives me just as crazy, honestly, and I've experienced different versions of this, is that no one in the room says anything. And
No.
it's the quiet minority drive me up a wall just the same. When it's for whatever their reasons are, like whoever is listening to this, or I hope a lot of that changes, because you don't have to be rude rude, but there are ways that someone could have made you feel supported in that moment. There was a teacher leading the session.
Yes, there were certainly things that others could have done to make the scenario more safe. Unfortunately, we are expected, to stand up for ourselves. And it takes some time to lean into that because I have to say, as and I don't want to sound away, but as a feminine woman, I do not prefer to be in my masculine.
Yeah,
I do
that's
not
healthy.
prefer. I
That's
don't
healthy. You don't. I've
prefer. Yeah,
had I have had to learn to lean out. I have this
yeah,
like assertive side to me and it's really served me well, especially when you're talking about sales leadership roles. They expect that of you as it relates to negotiating for the company, but when it comes up to you saying, "Hey, I have a voice," and "Hey, I think this or this could be better," like that's not how your voice is meant to be used. And I think that's also an indication of whether or not a leader is secure or insecure. Are they willing to hear what you have to say and why or why not?
absolutely. Absolutely. And again, it speaks more to them than us. We just have to make sure we continue using our voice and not let anyone silence us about anything, to be honest. But I'm still growing through that. For a lot of years I didn't speak about some of the things that I experienced. A lot of years. A lot of years. I just refused to talk about it. It wasn't so much to protect the other person, it was more so to try and be in my own peace. And then I realized you're not going to have peace if you continue to hold it in. And so I had to start being more assertive and I had to start using my voice a lot more in the ways that would serve me and strategically also.
It's fascinating and it's beautiful because we do go things for a reason. And there's this saying I heard recently too, where it's you're best served to teach a younger version of you, essentially. Like if you're going to teach anything as we get older and have these experiences, you're really speaking to younger versions of yourself, which again, you and I have talked a lot about is part of what we want to create as mentors is to have those resources so that when the next person is in a similar position with their back against the wall, you don't have to just say, "Oh my gosh, where do I go? Like how do I have support?" And I was going to ask you what your thoughts are on kind of why that's taken place because I've thought about this a lot, but I didn't realize it until I was at that place. Like why haven't I connected with other women that could have been a resource?
Yeah.
And I don't know where those women necessarily were because there weren't that many faces that looked like us in positions that we've climbed into.
I've always wondered this same question myself because I have encountered other women and I have, requested some to be mentors and it didn't work out in the ways that I had hoped, but I have to wonder, is it because maybe they didn't feel safe in where they were and they didn't feel like they had the capability to mentor someone? I know that in my mind, I know that I can teach someone anything. Like if you're just starting out, I never want anyone to have even similar experiences to some of the ones that I had. And I understand that everyone can teach something to someone, and we all have something to learn. So I have wondered the very same question and I have sought community. I just haven't been, well, up until now, I wasn't as successful as I'd hoped, but I do feel like more and more women are stepping into their power. Like you've started this organization, and that's something that I hadn't seen before. So in that way, it will be very beneficial. Like any knowledge and experience that I have had, I'm willing to share so that others can take what they can and maybe use it in their own situation. But I do think everyone can teach something to someone and everyone can learn something from someone. But I wonder maybe if it was like a confidence or safety in their own experience, because many of us have been taught to kind of doubt ourselves, and it does make me wonder if that's kind of been what's happening in the years prior. But I'm grateful now that you have created this space because I'm excited to help anyone that is coming in and facing dilemmas. Sometimes it does help to be able to bounce some of these things off of others. If you're a person like me and you don't have very many family members that work in a corporate environment, it could be very, very foreign when you face some of these situations that you've just never faced and you never would consider having to face. No one had ever taught me how to handle something like that, especially in a workplace. You want to remain employed, still remain within yourself while also trying to protect and defend yourself. It can be very challenging and it takes a lot of strategy. But I do think that the right resources are being put into place these days. And I hope that any young woman seeking mentorship or just support would come and find us.
Yeah, I completely agree. What a wild concept that for a woman like yourself with the experience you had, that you have to even think twice about going to someone in leadership about the experience you had. And that makes no sense to me. In speaking about something that happened that is clearly not okay, you have to worry about your
Yeah.
job security. It
I'm
doesn't make
worried
sense to
about the
me.
perception that you're just emotional about it, or that person didn't mean it that way, or all these things to minimize the experience that you're having. I've seen so many negative experiences just minimized
Yeah.
at the expense of the person experiencing them, and then it becomes an unsafe environment, and then you don't want to work there anymore. You don't feel comfortable being around your peers anymore. Some of these scenarios are happening in front of leadership and nothing is being said or done. It can be very challenging. It can be very, very challenging to navigate.
I had to reflect on this a lot myself. There's a luxury that exists if you haven't experienced it, because the ways in which I've experienced it have varied. And I think similar to yourself, I, for so much of my early career, just put my head down because I was so focused on getting to the top. I wanted to get to the top. So if anything kind of derailed that, you'd have a moment where you're upset, but it's okay, back to the main mission. And I think with so many experiences, looking at younger versions of myself, you just kind of brushed that under the rug and kept it moving. And, we talked about so many things. It's white men have been some of our best allies. Yeah, there are some ones that do what they did at that one training, but I've had white men who have been some of my best allies. I've had white women who were 10 times worse than I would have expected to be. It can happen in so many shapes and forms. It's really, is this a secure leader? Is this an insecure leader? But so much of it is just didn't know what to expect, didn't know how to even learn the importance of playing politics and strategy, as you mentioned, as you're moving up. You're like, I'm doing a good job. I don't want to focus on any of this drama, but it's
Yeah.
the insecure leaders who behind the scenes are weaving their little webs. And you're like, excuse me, what just
Yeah.
happened here?
It can be insane. I actually am in a few tech groups for Black people, and I read some of these stories that these mostly women are experiencing. It breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because you're right. Insecure leaders can break you if you let them. And that's where it becomes very tricky. Office politics. No one ever told me that I should have taken a class on office politics.
Yeah,
Okay. I haven't even
right.
seen it offered anywhere. But if
Right.
there were one, I would take it because office politics, it honestly should be studied.
No, it really should. It really should.
It took me so long to say something because it's not necessarily a safe work environment, and not safe in the fact that I never get along with my coworkers. That I definitely do, but it's not safe in the fact of the job market in general. The job market is really horrible. So a lot of times people will put up with things. They will wait to say things. They will hold things in because they don't want to make the problem bigger than they feel it needs to be. Most people just want to go to work and come home. They don't want to have to deal with, the extras. And that's how I am. I have other things going on in my personal life, like, with I'm a mom, I am an entrepreneur, I am a goal getter. So I'm always taking some certification course and trying to do school in every way better myself. So I don't necessarily feel like I have the time.
Yeah, well, you're an overachiever. I get it. And it's true. There's some truth in, like, you got to pick and choose your battles because life's going to keep sorting that person out.
Yeah.
Karma will
And
do
I
its
don't
thing.
want to
It's
be labeled as aggressive. I have been before. Like I literally have been. And I'm like, I've never even spoken to this girl.
It's
So
just,
I've been there, and I having some of these negative experiences, it makes it harder because you just know the process is going to be exhausting.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to explain in detail how this person did
But that's why you need more leaders who, because they exist out there, and it's just like they need to be leaning in. Everyone expects HR to figure this out and puts the onus and blame on HR. I can't even tell you how many HR people I've spoken to in the past few months, just them telling me their point of view on how this all works. And HR is a support function. HR is only as effective as the leaders in place. I know that when I was hiring my team, I'm like, how is it that my whole team is wildly diverse and we're doing essentially the same work? The first year we were doing direct sales the same way the direct sales team was doing, and yet the entire direct sales team is predominantly white men. You can't find any type of diversity in terms of hiring for that role. That makes no sense. And that's why you
it's
need
unlikely. It's
senior
unlikely
leaders.
that you're the only type of person that you can hire.
And that's what I'm like, I get it. Like, people relate to the experiences they relate to, but that's where anyone who is in a hiring manager position, I will say that all day, needs to have truly more training or just understanding of how their own staff shows up in the hiring process.
This is where like our barrier starts. If we can't get hired because the person behind the desk can't relate to us, what type of problems do those pose? Because I know very many well qualified people that can't get into certain roles because they
Yeah.
can't get in front of the right hiring manager.
But this is what I'm saying. I mean, this is where the sad reality of just the nature of the word DEI and what it's taken on now is people just hear the word and dismiss it, which again makes no sense to me. I'm like, what time are we living in? When I was hiring for the team that I had open headcount for, I was looking at core values. Are you going to be a hard worker? Are you going to find a way to figure out the answer no matter what? I can teach you the other skills because I'm confident in my own abilities as a leader, a manager, someone who can teach essentially what I've done really well throughout my career. But I can't teach those other values of integrity and trust and how to be a good person, which, especially in like client facing roles, you need to be able to build that trust and connect with people. So it's just fascinating to me when I see even some of these like massive tech companies or just large companies in general have these boxes that you're supposed to fit in, and they're testing your IQ, they're testing all this stuff. There needs to be way more EQ testing to
Yeah.
figure out, is this person a liability for my organization? Because I've seen it firsthand too. I've been at companies where I'm like, I don't think everyone here is a problem. I don't think the whole company needs to be taken down, but it's that handful of bad actors that the top dogs have no awareness of the real problems that they're causing and how it creates this rot within the organization. I think the C-suite has a whole different level of responsibility when it comes to that.
I love being able to work because I love challenging myself. And I also love receiving a paycheck so that I can pay my bills, right? So we're all here in
Yeah.
this experience and we're having to work. Most people do not want to be the one making waves that cause them to lose a position. And it's like once you complain on your manager, especially if it's your manager that is the bad apple, you don't know if you're going to be ostracized. You don't know if you're going to miss promotions. You don't know if it's
Yeah.
going to affect your bonus. Things like that. It really does affect our lives on a different level. It's not just we're going to work to complete work. No, we're going to work because we have a life to live. And most of us, want to be accomplished in some way and challenge ourselves through our work, right? But again, dealing with those interpersonal issues can be a challenge and a barrier to being successful in your life. And it can be very, very difficult when it's your manager, your direct manager. It makes it harder to complain. So, in my mind, a lot of those bad apples just haven't had enough people complain on them. And if you're even the
Yeah.
right individual, they can even sway opinions about you. And so
Yeah.
What do you do with that? How do you handle that?
I mean, there's a lot, and there are ways, and I think this is where there's so much power in sharing stories. And look, sometimes the answer is you got to go, because if an organization's keeping a bunch of bad actors in-house, sometimes it's just time to go, and there's nothing you can do, and that's fine, because there'll be another amazing experience for you down the line. But I will say, I was thinking about this. A close family member of mine who is a male was in a situation where he was having challenges with his direct manager. And I was so amazed at just where his brain immediately went in terms of how to navigate this. And it actually worked for him, where he basically told his boss, who was a woman, directly that this is not a way to speak to a person. And I'm uncomfortable, and I'm going to set up time with your manager, and said it outright to her.
I've never ever considered that.
Correct. I've never ever like that's like what? And I don't know if it's the dynamic, it's he is a male, because if it was a woman that said it to another woman, God knows what would have happened. But sometimes there are those dynamics that come out. And what would it have been if he was talking to a man? There's just these different things that do come into play. She thought that she was going to try to call his bluff. He went through with it, and he set up time, and with all the confidence in the world, laid out exactly what wasn't working, brought up certain thought-provoking questions, because there's a way you do it. You don't just say, my manager, you don't want to come off as a complainer, but there are really savvy ways that you can pose thought-provoking questions that get your point across. And I do love that stuff. I think there's so much value in understanding that. Again, it comes down to a little bit of like communication strategy, but to operate from that place, because I hear what you're saying and I relate to so much of what you're saying, but I continue to find that you can operate from two different places, a place of fear or a place of abundance. And I almost think, because we catch ourselves in different moments saying, oh, I don't want to lose my job and deal with all of this. But he went right into it being like, I know exactly what I'm here to say, and I'm going to say it. The fear wasn't even there,
That is such a man way to do anything,
I know.
honestly.
I
Men,
know.
and I love that this worked for your cousin, and I'm going to take it to myself as well, because
Yeah.
I would have never, doing that has never once crossed my mind. And that's
Correct. And this is what I'm
valuable
saying. Like,
doing. We need to think and do things more like that. And that's what I think that's kind of, it circles back to how women have been kind of conditioned to reduce themselves in certain way and not be wanting to be seen as a complainer, or like we don't want that sort of label.
yeah.
But that was extremely confident, probably the best move he could have made.
Yeah.
And honestly, I'm gonna take that
Yeah.
advice.
You know what? It comes down to, do you have the audacity to be yourself? Because that's what
Yes.
he was doing. He had the audacity to be himself. And when we play small is when we're really hurting ourselves, to be honest, and
Yeah.
potentially other people that are experiencing similar outcomes in the same environments, to your point. If there are other women out there who want to give back via mentorship, we would love to have you be a part of the Overachievers community. There are so many incredible women like Lakia here. You're an entrepreneur, you are a mom, you're a veteran, you have an amazing amount of certifications and have worked at incredible Fortune 500 companies. You're so humble. You're so thoughtful about just everything you've been through. And there really is so much power in creating an intentional community where we can learn and grow together, and take a lot of those skills we have that we are applying to companies and say, okay, how do we also channel that in other avenues to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, and then we can bring our best selves to all aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. We need to stand firm in who we are at all times, even when it's difficult. And we need to have the audacity to be unique, have the bravery it takes to stand and be an outlier and do those things that you might not see others doing. Have the bravery and the audacity to stand firm within yourself.
I love that. We're going to have an interactive conversation with Lakia
The audacity of the unique.
on the audacity of the unique. And I think there's so much that so many women can relate to and will want to contribute to that dialogue. To stay updated on when we're going to have the session, Follow us on LinkedIn, follow us on Instagram, the OverachieveHers. Go to our website, www.theoverachievehers.com. Thank you so much, Lakia, for being here. And I'm so excited to see the impact that you continue to make.
I'm excited to be here, and I'm so grateful that you have created this community that I can finally be a part of and be able to give back to others and hopefully learn something myself. So thank you.